Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Whitney Caceres from Modern Mommy Doc, and I'm here in my office at work bringing this lovely webinar to you today. We are going to be talking about how to set yourself up for breastfeeding success. And first things first, we are going to chat about a few things that I want to make sure that you know about just the webinar itself and about kind of what to expect as we're going along. So the first thing to remember is just that if you cannot hear me or you want to talk to me, that there is a whole chat area where you can send a message. You can send it just to me or you can send it to everybody. And at the very end of the session, I'm going to have you give me your questions that you might have about getting started with breastfeeding. And as you have them, then I will answer them as we go along. There's also going to be a few polls as we go along that will give you a chance to kind of give your piece. And you can just respond to them. It should show up on your sidebar there within the webinar, and you vote, and then I will post what the results are. And then stick around for the very, very end of the webinar where we are going to be we're going to be doing a very, very special promotion. And so I want to make sure that you have access to that at the very, very end of the webinar. In terms of just details on this, there will be a replay that will get emailed to you. So if you want to watch this later on, or you want to be able to see something that you forgot, then you'll be able to do that. And then the other is that you want to make sure that you just have your audio. If you can have earphones in, shut down everything else on your computer. It'll make it so that way the webinar hopefully runs a lot smoother. So, and then the other thing that I have to say, because I am a pediatrician, is that this does not replace any medical advice from an individual face-to-face medical provider. So the goal here is just to set you up for success and to make it so that as you go into being a new mommy, getting going with breastfeeding, that you have all the tools at your disposal that you need. So with that, let's get started. And like I said, you can type in your questions as we go, and then I will definitely make sure that I go through and answer them at the very, very end. Okay. All right, so we're going to start with how to prepare yourself for breastfeeding success. And the first thing I want to say is that I feel like this is one of those topics that is just not necessarily always the number one thing that's on your mind when you are getting going with having a new baby, in part because it's kind of hard to conceptualize. It's hard to know, like, what are the different components of it? What do I need to remember? How is it actually going to go wrong for me? It seems like it kind of goes right for most people when I talk to them, or it goes like horribly south. And so honestly, I'll just focus in on what's happening with the childbirth, and then I can leave kind of the lactation stuff to the end. And what I would say about that is just that you want to make sure that you're more prepared for breastfeeding in some ways than the childbirth part, because the childbirth part, it happens to you a little bit more. It just kind of depends on what's happening with the baby. You kind of can't control a lot of the factors. But the breastfeeding part, you actually can do some work from the get-go to make it so that it's a little bit easier. So that's one thing. So I'm going to do just a poll here just about how ready you feel to breastfeed. So I will just get it going. If you are just joining us, we're doing a poll on how ready do you feel to breastfeed? And you can just enter your information in here. I'll give us just a couple of seconds on here. And I'm going to end the poll in just a few seconds. Awesome. Okay. So, it shows that we had 50% that say that I'm clueless, 50% that said that they have a lot of information but still have questions. Nobody said that I'm all set, which is surprising, right? Okay, so number one. The number one thing that I tell people when they are getting going with feeding is that there is a rule of 3 hours start to start. And that may seem like a really, really specific thing that you need to know. But honestly, if you remember nothing else, 3 hours start to start is the most important thing. And this is why it's important. When you're first there in the hospital, you're going to have a lot of people who are kind of well-wishers, like, oh, it's also natural when you breastfeed. Everything seems like it goes really well when you breastfeed. It's all going to be totally fine. Just let the baby kind of be drowsy in the beginning and you kind of, drink your water and like watch some Netflix and hang out. But in the reality, in those first 24 hours after your baby's born, they are driving two feedback loops. And a feedback loop is basically, right, when you do something and then it makes it so that something else happens and that feeds back on itself and makes it so it happens more and more and more. So for a mom, the more that a baby suckles at the breast, the more a baby nurses, the more that a mom's body tells her, I am supposed to be making milk. And so your breasts make milk, make milk, make milk. A lot of people don't realize this, and so they don't really get going with the feeding because they feel a little bit like, well, I don't have much milk anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I'll just wait until like day 3 when the milk comes in. But the reality is you actually have to get that pump primed in order to make it so the milk does come in the future. And it's a little bit hard to do sometimes in the beginning because baby is pretty sleepy a lot of times in the first 24 hours and doesn't necessarily want to eat. So you don't have to be like, forcing this child to eat every single time. But you do want to at least get them so that they are awake. And I can talk about this in a little bit. Get them so that they're awake, get it so that you're stimulating them, get it so you're trying at least to have some effort with it. The second feedback loop is for the baby themselves. Skipped a couple slides here. There we go. Feedback loops for the baby itself. So the baby basically, the more that the mom eats, the more that the baby is getting their blood sugar up. So in the beginning, they kind of have high blood sugar when they first come out of the womb. And then as they don't get much milk in the first couple of days, they can kind of sustain themselves and they only need a little bit of milk, but not for very long. So it doesn't take very long, only like 2 days or so before the baby's kind of like, okay, I really, really need something here. And so the more that you feed the baby, the more that then the baby says, okay, great, I have my blood sugars that are in a pretty good spot. And so then I'm more stimulated and more energized to eat and so on and so forth. And it makes it so that the path kind of keeps on going in the right direction and they keep on eating and eating and eating and it's more successful and they're more awake. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a baby who is pretty drowsy when what you want is this baby in the end. You do not want a baby who is super, super drowsy at day 3 or 4 because then your milk won't begin necessarily and it'll make it more difficult to feed in the get-go and from the get-go. And that's kind of what happens sometimes in our clinic. We see a lot of kids at day 3 or 4 where, mom's milk hasn't come in. They've had kind of a harder time getting that feedback loop going. And then we end up with a lot more trouble. Things like jaundice, things like the weight gain or the weight loss being really, really significant, that type of thing. Okay, so there are some things to consider. You might be thinking, but wait, there's some advice that I've heard that maybe contradicts this. And so I want to address both of these things. The first is, what about on demand? So a lot of people talk about having babies be on demand and about how everything is really, really natural in the beginning. And there are even videos that are on YouTube, which are totally interesting and awesome, that talk about, a baby being able to find their own way to the breast and feed without any assistance from the mom and all of that. And that's beautiful if that happens for your baby. But my guess is that they're going to need a little bit of assistance. And later on, after your baby gets going with everything, then on demand is totally appropriate. So once they get to about the 2-week mark, they can be on demand. Sometimes even sooner than that, they can be on demand. But in those first few days, especially in that first 3 to 4 days, first 24 hours, even up to the first week, it needs to be every 3 hours so that way they can kind of get everything going. You both have to learn new skills, right? Baby has to learn the new skills and mom has to learn the new skills in order to be successful. Okay, the second is that there's a lot of talk in newborn courses about how a baby's stomach is really small, about how they don't need much food in the very beginning because they really can't handle that much. And so don't really worry. You only need like a drop or 2 of colostrum in order to be enough. And that is absolutely true. However, it picks up really, really quickly, right? So the first 24 hours, you can see, day 1 to 2, there's colostrum. It's kind of thick, syrupy, yellow gold, really nutrient dense. it's only about 5 to 7 mLs in the stomach that they can even handle. So like hardly anything. And they might have a couple stools, they might have a couple wet diapers, but then day 2 or 3, it's already up to 22 to 27 milliliters if you see that. So day 2 or 3, and then go to stomach size and capacity. Look across on that little chart. You'll see where it says it's a walnut size. By day 4 or 5, it's an apricot size. I mean, that is a huge increase over the course of just 5 days. And so that's why you want to kind of get things going, priming that pump, making it so that it's easier on your baby as you get going. So you want to make it so that once your milk does come in, that your baby's ready, that you're ready to feed them. And if that doesn't happen, these are the things that can occur, right? Your blood levels, the blood sugar levels drop. The baby can get more jaundice, so they can get more of a yellow tint to their skin, which we worry about because if jaundice levels get too high, if bilirubin levels get too high, it can sometimes go into the brain and cause some pretty severe damage. We care about the glucose levels or the sugar levels because that can make it so that a baby can either be way too sleepy to feed, or they can, in some really rare cases, have seizures, or just that it's way more difficult with the feeds, and you end up more likely to do things like supplementing, which can be great in some circumstances, but for most moms, that's not their number one goal from the very, very beginning. Okay, so you've got it. You're planning on feeding from the beginning, right? This is really easy. Why did we spend 10 minutes on this one simple concept? But you have to do these things in order to make that happen as well. Otherwise, the feeding every 3 hours will end up being kind of a toll on you. So number 1 is keeping baby active. So you've got to keep your baby really stimulated at the breast. And it's more aggressive than you probably think that it should be when you just think about like how you would normally stimulate a baby. Like when I think about caring for my babies, holding them in my arms, I think about just like holding them sweetly, all wrapped up in a blanket. When I think about nursing them after they got going, I think about like me just like chest to chest with them, and we're in a dark room and cozy and whatnot. But in the very beginning, what you're going to want to do is be maybe even flicking their feet, getting a cold washcloth on their forehead while they're eating. Some nurses or some lactation consultants talk with parents about doing what's called a chicken arm, which I don't know if you see my arm, but basically you're like moving their arm like this gently so you don't hurt their shoulder, but enough so that they're kind of awake. Getting them naked so that way they are cold enough so that they're not too warm and snuggly. Sometimes kind of rubbing on their back, kind of like almost like in an irritating way, like tickling on their back, not rubbing hard, but tickling on their back can also be something that can keep them really active. And the reason that you want to do that is because you want to make sure that when you're feeding them, they're not just burning a bunch of extra calories just sitting on your breast. That's honestly one of the worst things that can happen, because then they just burn like a lot of energy and then they end up losing more weight, and then you have to supplement them more or work even harder to get them back up to where they needed to be. Okay, the second is to get lactation help. And I said probably that the every 3 hours start was the most important advice I give. Maybe I should scratch that and say that this is the most important advice that I should give, because I really think lactation help is really, really important. And here is my tip. So in hospitals across the country, they are changing the way that lactation consults work. So when you're at the hospital, it should be that the nurses that you're working with, if you deliver in a hospital, should be lactation either certified or trained or be able to help you. But they should also have lactation specialists who are individuals who are specially trained. That's all they do. They don't do nursing. They only do the lactation stuff. And for the longest time, every single person who came to the hospital and was delivered, and it was their first baby before they left the hospital, that person would get a lactation consult. They would get a full-on like 20 minutes or 30 minutes with a specialized person who would go through how to do things with them. And at least in our community, that has dropped by the wayside for funding purposes. And so you actually have to have a special problem, quote unquote, in order to get a lactation consult. And that might not seem like that big a deal before you get to that point, but really if you think about it, back in the day, if you lived in a home with your aunts and your mom and your sisters, you would have had so much hands-on time with Lactation Help. You would have had a lot of people who would have been holding your baby. You might have been actually nursing like a 2-year-old while somebody else nursed your baby in the beginning, so that way, I'm talking about back in the day, so that way you guys were only learning individually. But right now you're learning together with hardly any support. For most of us, our parents maybe were older when they had us. Maybe they didn't even breastfeed to begin with. And so my opinion is, and what I see in my practice, is that we need at least that one really hardcore, lactation consult so that we get going on in the right way. And the things that you want them to help with are things like getting the correct latch, having your positioning be correct, making sure that there aren't any issues in terms of things like tongue tie, all of those things that can kind of get in the way. So, I don't think that we should have to justify getting lactation help, right? I think it's an important thing. It's almost like one of our rights as new moms or whatnot, if you want to get political. Okay. And yeah, the other thing is at the hospital, you have to remember that nurses who are working there are just like other humans, right? So it is fair for us to kind of be the squeaky wheel just a little bit, the nice squeaky wheel, because we all have human nature and might just be moving on to something else. So the other thing is at the hospital, you want that lactation consult, but you also want with your nurses who are lactation trained to every time that you're trying to latch your baby in the beginning, as much as possible to ask them for their advice as well, at least just on the latch. So that way, multiple times throughout that hospital stay, which is usually a couple days if you're delivering vaginally, 3 days of C-section, just traditionally, that's what it is. So that should be plenty of time for you to get a lot of help from those people. Other places to get help for lactation are asking your friends who they used. So in the community, normally there are a few people who are kind of private lactation people who might even come to your house and help. Making a prenatal appointment with a pediatrician in town. So at our office, we do prenatal visits, which just means that we meet with people, talk about what people can expect when they have their baby and what they can expect at our practice. But we also talk about the fact that we have lactation specialists here. And so if you can get in with a practice that has that, awesome. Because then as soon as you're having problems, once you come home, if you do have problems, you can access those people and get help as well. And then, of course, like I said, help at the hospital. But those are the 3 main ways. There are some other sites out there that have help for lactation, but these are the 3 main ways that most people use to get their help. Okay, so new parents care the most about one thing, which is just making sure that their newborns are safe and healthy. I think that's probably, we can all agree that that is our number 1 priority. And the breastfeeding period can make it so that that feeling of our kids are safe and healthy. If we're not kind of getting the help that we need or making sure that we're getting the information that we need, then that can kind of mess with that sense of security. And so it pays just to concentrate first on getting good feeding cycles, on getting the help that we need, and then also on understanding what can go wrong. And the reason that you want to understand this is not so that you'll be freaked out and be all scared as you go into having your new baby. It's more because knowledge is power, right? If we know it can go wrong and it starts going wrong, then we can reach out for help even sooner and get it fixed sooner. So the first is latch difficulties. So when a baby gets onto a mom, they have no idea what they're doing in the very beginning. And the intricacies of latch actually are really, really specific to each mom, depending on what her nipple size is, depending on how big the baby's mouth is, depending on if you have inverted nipples, all of that. And so, latch difficulties can cause a lot of difficulties for, no pun intended, for a lot of new parents. A lactation person, again, is going to be the best person to help you figure out what's going on with that. And there are some clues to what latch difficulties, if you're having latch difficulties. The other is excessive weight loss. So when a baby is born, they are expected to lose up to 10% of their birth weight. So we expect that when they are born, they're going to be kind of at their birth weight, and then maybe by 2 or 3 days later, they might get up to 10%. And usually that's happening more, like I said in the very beginning of this webinar, if they're not getting quite enough of that priming of the pump from the get-go. There are some other reasons why it can happen too. Sometimes if moms lose a lot of blood, they maybe won't lactate quite as well or be as productive as they would be otherwise. If baby went through a lot of stress when they were first born, if they're a premature baby, then sometimes they can have excessive weight loss. But those are clues that, okay, we need a little bit of help. We got to get going with it. And tied to that would be a problem of your milk isn't coming in. So by about day 3 to 4, your milk should be in. And if you refer back to that chart that we looked at before, go back a little bit. Bear with me for just a sec. We're going to go back to that chart that showed. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we're going back to this chart that showed how big a baby's stomach is and by day 4 or 5. So the reason that the baby's stomach is bigger at day 4 or 5 is because the milk is in, and so it's growing to accommodate that milk. And you'll know that a baby is coming in, the milk is coming in primarily by their sucking and swallowing when they're eating. So you can see them actually physically swallowing and sucking and kind of gulping as they're eating. And the other is by the poop. So if you look at the very bottom of this chart, it shows on day 1 to 2, if you have 1 to 2 wets and greenish black kind of meconium stool is what we call it. It looks really gross, like this tar stool, then that's normal. But by day 4 to 5, we should have at least 3 dirty diapers. And it's yellow. It usually looks like it's seeds in it, which is kind of just from the byproducts of milk. And it's kind of runny. And it should be like, wow, we are getting significant increases in our poop. And that is a huge clue that things are going well if that does happen. If it's not helping, then that's a big clue that the milk probably is not in and that we have an issue. Again, probably to reach out to lactation, or at least your pediatrician would be worried and would be working with you. Okay, I'm going to go back to where I was for just a second. Bear with me. Close your eyes maybe. Just a second. There we go. Okay, and then jaundice is one of the other issues and things that you can tell that things aren't going well. So jaundice basically it comes from bilirubin. So jaundice is just the color of the skin, and jaundice is that yellow color that can be caused by breakdown of red blood cell products in the skin, in the blood, red blood cells in the blood, which can release bilirubin. There are some other reasons why bilirubin is produced in the body and other reasons why kids can get jaundice, infection being one of them, issues in terms of kind of breakdown of red blood cells and how they interact with mom's red blood cells. But by far, the biggest reason that kids get jaundice in the first 3 to 4 days and that it becomes a problem is if the milk isn't coming in and kids are getting dehydrated. So that's one clue. And then the other issue that can kind of prove that we're having difficulties with feeding is obviously difficulties with your baby handling feeds. So if your baby was choking or spitting up the feeds, that's a clue that things may not be going so well and that we need a little bit of extra help from either a pediatrician or even more helpful from a lactation provider. And with the feeding difficulties, basically all babies have this connection that's between their feeding tube or esophagus and their stomach. And for all babies, it's kind of floppy. It's called the pylorus. For some babies, it's so floppy that all the milk is just kind of coming up and up and up. Or if mom is having a lot of overactive letdown, so the milk is coming out super, super fast, that can also make it so babies just have more milk that is coming up. I mean, if you just think about yourself, if you just downed a huge Coke or a huge beer and a huge burger, and then you just sat there and like lied on your back, that's kind of the feeling that these kids get sometimes when they have a lot of milk from mom. And mom can tell if that's happening a lot of times if she's getting tons of milk just kind of like spraying out like a waterfall as she's feeding. So that's one of the other things that can give you a clue that things just aren't going quite right with the feeding. And a lactation specialist can help you with figuring out the positioning that you need for your baby if it is about kind of overactive letdown, so the milk coming out too fast, or can give you some help in terms of sometimes giving some medicine for baby if it's just about them and the way that their anatomy is, or helping you with positioning them in a way that's helpful for them, so that after feeds, they have less of that food that's coming back up to them. Okay, so we just went through a lot about the most important thing to know as you are getting going with breastfeeding, about issues that can happen when you're breastfeeding and that can signal that there's a problem, and then about getting help, and how to access help, and then how to know if you need help. So there's still a lot more to know though, right? What do you do when you have these problems? How do you specifically find a lactation person? What are the websites? Where can you go? Are there videos that I can watch that will show me how people do breastfeeding successfully, get that positioning right? And how about the other parts of having a newborn? So I'm just going to do one more poll here. Oh, I didn't do it. Okay, that's okay. The poll was just going to be about, do people have more questions about other areas of newborn care, and what are the areas that are top of the list? And for me, I know that at the top of my list was sleep, sleep, and sleep. That I wanted to know, how do I get my baby to sleep as fast as possible? The other things on the list were, if I hadn't found one yet, if I wasn't in this practice, how do I find a pediatrician? What can I expect from the nurses when I am in the hospital? What's it like with my partner? How do I get my partner on board with actually helping me once I have this baby? No diss, to partners, but sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming for us and for them. And then how do I find ways to provide self-care for myself, to get the support that I need? How do I know how to look out for things like, what do I look for postpartum depression and anxiety? Kind of where do I go for the rest of things? What do I do for gear? All of that. So that is why I created the Newborn Baby Blueprint, which is through Modern Mommy Doc. It's an online comprehensive course that goes through basically everything you need to know to get set to have a newborn. So the stuff that I talked about today, all super important, super awesome, but this delves really, really deep. And I created it because I feel like we are missing out in our society on actually giving new moms information that they need in a way that's practical and easy to access. So I don't know about you, you might have already done this. I definitely did like the hospital, go there, they talked to me about everything I should know about having a new baby, how to do the swaddle, yada, yada, yada. And I left there not really sure still exactly what I was supposed to do. And even as a pediatrician, I felt like I still had questions about what it was going to be like when I had my own baby. And I know my husband definitely did. He felt like it was long, that it was not personalized. He felt like, he didn't have a place to ask questions afterward. And so that's why I created this. And in this course, you're going to find out how to prepare your brain, your partner, and your home for having a baby, how to find childcare providers and a pediatrician, what to expect in the first days and weeks, how to set yourself up for breastfeeding success, which we talked about a little bit today, but we go through even more of the details of how to find a pump, of how to get bottles, of how to start bottles when you're going back to work, all of that. How to care for a newborn, how to keep your newborn safe. And my goal is that you'll be more confident, more at ease, and more ready than you thought possible. If you read my blogs at all on modernmommydoc.com, you will see that I am a big advocate for new moms and for women in general. And I really feel like, unfortunately, the way that the United States has things set up and how the medical system is and the work system and all of that, it just sets us up, honestly, to kind of like ruin like being a new parent. And so my hope with this was to try to help with that, to help to aid parents with that. You're going to have unlimited access, to 20 lessons, including introduction, preparing yourself mentally, gearing up your gear, finding a pediatrician, making a plan with your partner, focus on self-care, choosing a childcare option, and finding dream caregivers. Being in the hospital, the day you go home, which is probably the most fear-inducing day of my life. I had a nurse when I was at the hospital and we were leaving who said, you know, Whitney, even though you're a pediatrician, if you just feel scared out of your mind tonight, that's totally normal. So this one's a big one. Doctor visits at home in the first 2 weeks, choosing a breast pump and accessories, using a hand pump, breastfeeding in the hospital, understanding what can go wrong. Getting the help you need for lactation, newborn sleep, soothing your baby, common freak out findings. So recognizing things infants do that are totally normal but tend to scare people, and keeping your baby safe. And I have partnered with psychologists here, with lactation consultants, and with a host of other pediatricians, just to make sure that it is all as great as it can be for you guys. There's also 12 PDF downloads with practical how-tos and guidance. You can look at them here. You saw that stool changes in the first week one. That's just one of them. So those examples of some of the downloads that are here on the program. And it's all online. It's for you if you want to be more confident as you enter parenthood, if you want to have a plan for taking care of your baby and knowing what to expect, and you want to be able to handle that transition from life pre to post kids, which is often awesome and amazing, but just a little bit of kind of a jolt to the system. And if you want to have a working knowledge of lactation and a wealth of resources at your fingertips. It's obviously not for you if you feel totally ready to be a new mom or ready to breastfeed, but we already established in the very beginning that that's probably not the case for all of us. Wasn't for me. We've had a lot of people who have been really excited about the program after they've taken the course. It's all online. It's all completely up-to-date information. That's all American Academy of Pediatrics, approved information. But most importantly, I think that it comes from, myself as a pediatrician, having the experience also with my kids. And of course, if you do the course, we want to know that you're 100% satisfied, and we would always do money back guarantee if within 30 days you aren't happy. The biggest thing is that you have 24-hour online access to it. So it's presentations. It's a slide presentation kind of like this, where I'm talking in audio over it, kind of like this, though you don't see my face on every single one. And then there are PDFs that are available that you download. And we are just starting a new question and answer portion of it too, so that there's the ability to ask some of those individual questions people might have before they have their baby. Okay, so we have some special savings for you guys, like I alluded to in the very beginning of the course. And so let's go through here. So the newborn baby blueprint normally is $167. And the ultimate self-care guide, which is kind of the partner to that, is normally $79. And so the bundle together is normally $200. And so today we're giving away the whole thing for $100. And what you're going to do, I'm going to pull up this offer, but hang tight if you're interested in this one, because there's a better one coming. Hold on. Okay, so if you signed up within the next 72 hours, and you would get 50% off both of them. So for the bundle, you would get it for $100. And so you can, if you push add to cart, then it will take you to the website, and then you can just click on the newborn care and self-care bundle, and you enter the code EARLYBIRD. And you can access that. But wait, don't go there quite yet, because do the other offer here. All right. If in the next 24 hours you sign up for it, we're going to do 50% off of the combined courses. So the self-care and of the Modern Mommy Doc newborn blueprint. And we're also going to give you a Gomi Kids newborn bundle set. And this is really cool. It has mitts. It has little booties, and then it also has these really cool jams. And it's all in this bundle together like this. It comes in a number of colors. We're going to do either the aqua dots or the pink dots for people. So you can choose whatever you want. And once you sign up for the course, basically I'll email back and forth with you. We can figure out which one that you want to get. The cool thing about the jammies here, hold on just a sec, is that these actually have this one snap on the bottom. So you actually are you put them in at night. You can turn the little hand things over on themselves so that if you're going to do like newborn pictures or whatever the next day, you can have that available. But then on the bottom, you just do a one snap. So that if you're trying to do diaper changes in the middle of the night, which is one of my husband and my pet peeves, then you can go ahead and do that too. So I'm just going to publish this offer. It's 50% off now for the next 24 hours, and you get the Go Me Kids set. So it's $100 for all of it together, which is cool. And Go Me Kids is just one of my favorite groups out there. They do a ton of stuff with human trafficking. They're all about supporting moms and making sure that moms feel awesome about themselves as they are getting going. So again, you're going to want to go to you're going to want to just go to where it says add to cart, and then it's going to take you to newborn bundle again, and you're going to enter the code newborn, and that will get you the Go Me Kids set as well for the next 24 hours. Okay. All right. So I am going to stop the slide presentation and go back to me here, and I'm on the chat here. So if anybody has any messages or anything that they want to ask me, I am totally open to any questions that you have. I'm here. I'll stick around for a little bit, so that way we can get your questions answered. I'll stick around for a little bit. And if people want to even just respond with what since I couldn't get the poll going, if anybody wants to even just respond with what the thing is that they are the most nervous about with getting going with a newborn, that would be awesome too, if anyone wants to put their chat about that. Okay, awesome. I see a few people that are private messaging just me where it's not showing up. Oh yeah, okay, great. So someone asked, can you explain how stimulating the baby while feeding makes them spend less calories, which can seem counterintuitive. So basically, the reason that you want to stimulate the baby while you're feeding them is that then when they're sucking on your breast, then it's actually like actively sucking and making it so that you're getting milk. So if the baby just kind of like on your breast, and some people do this for like an hour at a time, because occasionally in hospitals, people tell them, oh, you should just let your baby just like feed forever and ever. Then they just sit there and they kind of burn calories, and they actually are like not getting any milk, but they're sitting there on the breast. And the other thing is that mom's nipples then tend to get super, super sore. So then the next time that the baby is going onto the breast, then they're working even harder to try to get milk. So then they actually burn more calories because of that. Versus if you're stimulating them, then they actually are more active with their sucking. So then they take less time to suck. And so they're more efficient. And so they burn less calories. And, it's probably not true for the first like 1 or 2 feeds as they're getting going, because they're not getting as much. But as they get going, even into day 2, I would say that that's absolutely true. So hopefully that's helpful. Okay, I will definitely, if there's anybody else, go ahead and type in your request for what you want other information about, as topics or as webinars, or interested in having actually as even like free blog posts that are on the site. That is fine too. And otherwise, I will definitely get to all the private messages that people sent me that they had individually about it. But hopefully you guys feel like you learned something today about breastfeeding and about what you need to know and how to get yourself set up. Okay, definitely send me an email at info@modernmommydoc.com if you have any individual questions after this, and you should be getting a replay of this webinar to your inbox for the next 24 hours. Okay, bye.